Hey everybody, this is graphic designer Roberto Blake helping you create something awesome today. So in today's video, we're going to do things a little differently. This topic is going to address both graphic designers and design clients because we're going to be covering what does logo design actually cost. Now in previous logo design videos, I've talked about this a little bit and I've done a rant about Fiverr and we won't even go there. We're not even going to put that on the table. We're going to get into the nitty-gritty of what logo design costs. We're going to talk about ballpark figures and why they aren't as helpful as you might think they are. We're going to talk about how to accurately do quotes. We're going to briefly talk about the design process, and we're going to talk about charging for time versus charging for results and why you need to do the latter. So if you've ever wondered what you should be charging or what you should be charged for a logo design, this video is probably going to be very helpful for you. So let's talk about logo design and ballpark figures. When a client asks for a ballpark figure, they're just, trying to get a sense of how much is this going to cost me. And I understand where you're coming from if you're a client watching this. And for designers, I want to caution you about giving out arbitrary ballpark figures with no basis for them, even if that's what the client's looking for. You absolutely want to do what a client is asking in most cases, but when someone's asking a general inquiry, a lot of times they don't necessarily know what they're asking for or what the appropriate questions they should be asking are. And as for you clients, I'm going to help you understand the questions you should really be asking a graphic designer when you're getting logo design done, because this is something that's representing your name. You're putting your name to this, and as a business person, you know that names are important, reputations are important, and you can't take chances with those things. And your reputation is going to precede you, the look is going to precede you. So when you're developing anything around your brand, like your logo, which is going to be the foundation of your brand, you absolutely have to drill down and go deep, even if you don't feel like you have the time for it. This is going to be one of the best ways you can spend your time. So it's worth 5 or 10 minutes per designer of dealing with this. So asking for a ballpark figure on a logo design, I want you to put this in perspective. Imagine if you were asking for someone to give you a quote on painting your house. Do you think it makes sense to get a quote back from that person at whatever number they're giving you if they haven't asked you and you haven't answered, well, how many rooms are involved here? How many rooms are we painting? What's the square footage? Do I need to strip down the wallpaper first? And different things of that nature. And obviously, is it a different color per room? Now, you might say, well, that's different than a logo design, but here's why it's not. There are a couple of different types of logos, and I've covered this in the How to Design a Logo video. You have word marks that are just text-based logos, you have emblems and symbols like the Starbucks logo, and you have combination marks as well. So these combine a graphical image with words, and in an interesting and unique way. It might even require a modification to a typeface. So based on what type of logo you're getting done, you might need different pricing and you might have different scenarios for those. You might want the logo to be in color in addition to needing it in black and white. That's going to take more time, and that's going to be color research. That's going to be matching it to your branding if that already exists, so on and so forth. So that's a consideration. And in some cases, you need multiple variations of just the one logo. So you might have the logo, across. You might have the name stacked. You might have it with that and then a symbol next to it. So you need that for a combination mark and you need it to stand alone. You might need 5 variants of a logo, which is the same thing as doing 5 different logo designs. That's not going to be the same price as if you just did one version of the logo one way. So a graphic designer cannot possibly give you an accurate quote by giving you a ballpark figure just off the bat of what do you charge for logos. And if a graphic designer is being professional, they shouldn't say, oh, well, I charge 300 for logos, or I charge 500 for logos, or I charge 1,000 for logos, just right off the bat without saying, well, what type of logo are we talking about? Because it's a difference in the amount of time, the amount of research, the amount of revisions, the amount of back and forth with you to determine your needs. So again, it's literally just like painting a house. It's that we have to know how many are we talking about, how many colors, all of these different things that make up the project and what you need based on your business, because you might think you need something differently, but maybe the graphic designer has worked with a client successfully before in a similar industry or a similar situation to yours, and they can help you save money if you're upfront with them about what you need. And sometimes it's better to just tell the graphic designer, I have a budget of X, can you work with me? And just tell them what you would like for that budget. Now, I know this might go against your business instinct of wanting to get the best possible deal and the best possible price, but let me ask you an honest question. Is getting the lowest and best price more important, or is getting the best quality result what's really important when we're talking about a logo and the foundation of your brand? Put it another way, if you were going to have facial surgery done, would you be worried about the bargain that you're going to get with a lower rate surgeon, or would you want the best that your money can buy? And I asked that question because that logo that's going to be on the sign for your business card, the t-shirts, anything that represents your business and is the difference between someone doing business with you or not, is the face of your company. So from that standpoint, the haggling, the bargaining, the fishing, all of that, goes out the window when you really consider that this is about what makes me look good to my customers and my clients and makes me money, and what am I willing to pay for that? Figure out for yourself what the most you're willing to pay for that is, and if it comes down to it, just tell all your designers, can you work with me for this price, and what would you give me for this price? And then based on the value for your maximum budget, or whatever you're telling them your maximum budget is, go with that and ask what you can get for that. And then you can add on things that you think you might need, like business cards or what to do this or what to do that, and etc., and figure that out. So again, transparency is important, but also finding good designers with good reputations that you feel comfortable to be transparent with is part of that process. Speaking of process, let's talk about the graphic design process and how that relates to pricing. So a lot of people, and I've talked about Fiverr and why that's nonsense, and we won't go there. So let's talk about the logo design process and how that affects what the cost of a logo design is. So in a previous video, I've talked about the logo design process. I've talked about the fact that you have the concept and development stage where you're figuring out what typefaces, what color schemes we're talking about, maybe some thumbnail sketches are involved, and that's the beginning of the creative process, and that's the back and forth between the designer and the client. That takes up time. The designer is not working for their other clients, is not doing their own business and internal processes, and is not marketing themselves and bringing in new client business. So they absolutely need to be paid for time that is developed in the research, even if that doesn't lead to the final product, because that's an investment on their part, and that's what the upfront deposit is for. Then you have the design and revisions phase. This is the actual digital execution of the approved concept that's being developed here. So that's the actual work that's being done on this. But it doesn't end there, because just because you've got a JPEG and you see what the design is going to look like doesn't mean that it's ready to be used, especially if we're talking about for print. You need specific deliverable files at that point, and that's going to include PNGs, it might be an SVG, it'll certainly, hopefully be an EPS vector logo, and you'll need this in CMYK for print and RGB for web. So the production phase of getting all of those together and getting the black and white and the color versions of that to you, and any of the notes that the printer might need, and what fonts are being used and what companion fonts should go with this, etc. That's important. And then that's the production and deliverables phase. And until you pay the final installment for that phase, you don't have the right to use the logo. That's another thing that you need to understand, is that all the concepts, all the ideas that the designer, did, you don't own those. The designer owns that copyright until you've paid for the complete project in full. And in most cases, designers specifically state that until you pay the final balance of the project, that the rights do not transfer to you. And you also need to understand what rights you have with regard to your logo in terms of usage. So you need to be clear and you need to be honest about what you want to use it for, and that needs to be communicated in writing between the designer and the client. That is the proper way to handle the logo design process and your negotiations for a logo design project. With regard to that, my preference is to pay for deliverables. My preference is that the creative phase represents an initial deposit for the back and forth, the time, the ideas, the concepts, the thumbnails, all that stuff. That's one payment. The design phase, that's a second payment. And then the production and the deliverable of the final files, that's the final installment, that's the final thing. So it's broken down to 3 phases and 3 payments. This works out really well because of transparency. The client feels like they're getting something and they're paying for something. They're getting something and they're paying for something, or vice versa. They're paying for something and getting something every single time. For a designer, this is great for cash flow reasons, because they're doing work that they've been paid for. They're doing work that they've been paid for. And this creates the incentives as well for both people to conduct the business efficiently and honestly. And that's my take on how you deal with the payment structure, and the logo design process. Let's talk about paying for time versus results when you're talking about design projects, and specifically logo design projects in this case. So some people like to quote hourly rates, and some people want to be quoted hourly rates. I absolutely don't believe in hourly rates because I already know that there's more to something than the time you're putting in. There's the cost against it, the cost of doing business, the opportunity cost for you working on this versus something else, etc. So anybody who's really good at business as a designer is going to factor their hourly quote-unquote rate, or how much they want to make per hour, into the overall price of the transaction, and they're going to account for whatever their cost of doing business and their losses are in that as well. So it's better to go to sort of an agency model of doing a la carte services and having fixed flexible rates versus outright hourly rates, because then you're only paying for labor and there's more to it than that. On the other side of that, people don't value time equally. So if you pitch someone on an hourly rate, they might be less inclined to pay that than to pay for the overall result and the investment and see what the ROI is. I'm more apt to pay someone that tells me what a flat price is and why it is and break it down for me than to pay for an hourly rate. If I pay someone to paint my house and I pay them per hour, they have no incentive to finish it as quickly as possible. The process can be dragged out because they need to make a certain amount of money. But if they know they're making a certain amount of money from me and from everyone else to paint houses based on an accurate quote, based on what the process involves, how many rooms, how much square footage, etc., then they're going to feel more comfortable to get the work done as quickly as possible and get my house painted, because they're on to the next job, the next house, for that amount of money. So that's why I say that it's better to pay for results rather than pay for time, because it's just going to be more honest, in my opinion, and more transparent, that you know what you're paying for versus the value of someone's time that you may disagree with. So, how much does logo design actually cost? It depends on the situation, it depends on the quality of the work between you and the designer, it depends on what your goals and your agenda are, and that's what it comes down to. There is no magical number that is the appropriate number for a logo design. If you're paying somebody who's never done a logo design in their life or is 14 years old, you know what? Maybe $5 is an appropriate price. I don't believe that. I don't believe in Fiverr for logo design or graphic design or web design at all. I believe that if you're going to do maybe something like transcription, voice acting, or whatever, that $5 for your lowest package, and then you scale up to 50 or 100 from there based on what it is. I believe Fiverr is appropriate for that. But there's no way that I honestly believe personally that $5 is worth a logo design, and I would never entrust the face of my business or any business that I'm a part of to something that we invest in terms of that forward-facing identity. I would never feel comfortable only paying $5 for that and getting what I paid for. And I would not take the chance of getting a bargain there, and that's my personal business ethos and my decision, and that's what I'm recommending to you as well, and that's just where I'm coming from. I believe in investment, and I always invest in myself first, and if I want quality, I understand that I'm going to have to pay for it. There's an iMac back here. There's a Nikon camera filming this. I had to invest with regard to that stuff. There's software here. There's Adobe. There's Corel. It's about investment. And, at the end of the day, that's a decision that you have to make as a business person of what am I willing to invest in what represents me and brings me more business. And based on that representation, what are people going to be willing to pay me for my products, services, what have you? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video about what to charge for logo design. This was not the video I was planning to shoot today, but I'm glad we did it. So I hope you understand now what logo design costs, what you could or should be charging if you're a graphic designer as a client, the type of questions that a graphic designer should have for you, and what you should be thinking about when commissioning a logo project. If you still have questions about logo design and what it costs or what it should cost, or you have comments or ideas about that yourself, leave that stuff in the comment section below and we'll have a discussion about it. I'll answer as many of your questions and comments as I possibly can. Anyway, like this video if you like it. Don't forget to subscribe. Check out the other awesome content on the channel. As always, you guys, thanks so much for watching, and don't forget, create something awesome today.